people use the term insurance to define a pretty broad industry. You got life, you got health, you got casualty, you got all these different types. All of them have some things in common, and all of them have their uniqueness. Insurance was an early adopter of employing imaging and other electronic means to move data, and workflows associated with dealing with claims of any type. Many of those systems were built into their line of business software, their insurance software. As organizations have made changes in those systems, they've really struggled getting all that information converted and moved over, and it can be very, very expensive. So one of the things that we've seen as a trend in insurance is segregating out the content management, the document management, the workflow into a single platform. That way, their back office can take advantage of it and start deploying some of this process improvement, as well as being able to use that as the back end for their insurance programs. But they're also discovering there's all sorts of functionality that they had really not thought about. One that I like a lot is that insurance organizations spend a lot of time building compound documents, complex documents. And they do it in a whole lot of different ways, and you'd be surprised at how antiquated some of the processes are. Some are a little bit streamlined. They might have Word templates and push data from their mainframe to a data file and do a mail merge. But often the complexity of the pieces and parts that go together and the terms and conditions associated with each can be a little bit more complicated than just pushing something to a somewhat intelligent mail merge. So to be able to have a document composition capability where a workflow automatically initiates that process and pieces and parts are built from the logic that they operate under, that's huge. And then to also be able to say, okay, I either want to email this, or I want to fax it, or I want to print it and mail it. Those are all huge. We saw another interesting thing in a life insurance entity. They had the requirement they needed to reconcile on a regular basis the policies they held with a federal register of people who were deceased. And that was a very tedious process and a very manual process. So to be able to take that process and automate it, to have that run regularly, and simply get their list of, well, here are the people that have been added to the government's list that you have policies on, and here's how you can go ahead and find their next of kin and make settlement. That's huge. So we see a lot more need for complex workflows that need to be very simple. One last example, we worked with an organization that had implemented this technology probably 15, 20 years ago. And what we noticed was that in their workflow, although it was automated, what it really meant was every day, every person in their processing department needed to look at every tab for every claim that they were working to check and see whether something needed to be done. So this is another example of making something complicated. As we implemented our systems, we made a pretty major change, but it was a pretty simple one. And that was they were pushed any tasks that required attention. So instead of doing this hunt and peck and find and fix in the priority that they choose, because it was easy or whatever, now they're getting served the next most important step that must be completed first before you can move on to the next, and they're not wasting 20 or 30% of their time looking to see if there's work to be done.